Since we're talking about startups, let me draw the analogy to what Mr. Kant is doing, because the Niti Aayog perhaps can be recognized as a startup in the government or within the government. It's all of 4 years old, or a little over 4 years old. What does it feel like, sir, to run a startup within the large sort of Indian government setup?
It's very exciting because Niti Aayog cuts across different ministries. It's a very new area, largely because the Planning Commission used to deal with financial outlays. It used to do annual plans, 5-year plans. We've done away with them. What we do is a 15-year vision document, a 7-year strategy document, and a 3-year action plan. So it's become more action-oriented. It does a lot of outcome-based analysis. We have a monitoring wing which does outcome-based analysis of all the different ministries, puts them out in public domain, and we see how much the government has moved forward in many of these areas. And we do programs like the aspirational districts, where we monitor performance of districts on health, education, nutrition on a real-time basis, and look at cutting-edge areas like artificial intelligence. We look at blockchain. We're doing a series of pilot projects. And of course, we are driving the Atal Innovation Mission, which is doing some amazing work. They've done about close to 3,000 tinkering labs, supported a vast number of incubation centers, now doing a number of grand challenges. So our objective is to push the whole innovation ecosystem forward.
Well, speaking of pushing the innovation ecosystem forward, San, you spoke about AI and you spoke about blockchain, and this was a commitment that the government made in the budget earlier this year. John Chambers was on stage just before you came, and one of his messages is that for a country like India, if you need to innovate at speed and scale, you will have to work with the government and partner with the government. So give me a sense of what is the plan to try and integrate the startup ecosystem with what the government intends to do, whether it's with AI or blockchain, or any of those other emerging technologies?
So Shireen, that's really important. And the amazing thing is that all the startups in different areas which are doing great work, I mean, look at a startup like Imbibe, which is doing learning outcomes. Aditi, she uses a lot of artificial intelligence. If it wasn't for the use of artificial intelligence, Flipkart would not have made it so big. Or Oyo. I mean, Oyo is a dramatic company and it's making forays into international destinations now, simply because it's able to use artificial intelligence to figure out which rooms are available, at what prices they can market, at what time of the day they should sell at what price. So you're using artificial intelligence in a very big way. Or look at Ola. I mean, Ola is not possible without artificial intelligence today. So many of these big companies, or look at another startup like Netradyne, I mean, in the world of transportation. All of them. I mean, Netradyne is a great example of artificial intelligence driven by somebody who came from Qualcomm, started his own company, and is driving it. So and there are close to about 300 odd Indian startups today which are artificial intelligence driven. Now, the challenge for all of them is that unlike America, where data is available with Google and Facebook, and unlike China, where data is available with Tencent and Alibaba, in India, there are public entities. So you have, you have Aadhaar, you have UIDAI, you have GST, you have now you'll have Ayushman Bharat, which is catering to 500 million Indians, and you have income tax, where 99.3% of Indians pay income tax, and you have the public finance management system of the government, which is all database. Everything is digitized in government. So all these public entities must learn the art of putting out relevant data in public domain. And, because...
But for that, you need to have legislation in place. For that, you need to have data protection law in place. Do you feel confident of us being able to move the bill in this session of Parliament? Do you have any indication?
Yeah. So my view is that, it's very important. Why I'm saying this is very important to put out data in public domain is because we need to provide adequate data for our startups to innovate. Without data being made available to the startups, they'll find we can't make our startups data starved. They need data, number one. Number two, you need a lot of academicians and research universities and all these research universities to do analysis on data. And all that requires data to be put out in public domain. And I think it's very important that government comes out with a privacy law, which it is working on. It was waiting for the Sri Krishna Committee report, which has come out. It'll work on. And that work is at an advanced stage, whether it comes in this session or next session, but that is a topmost priority of the government, to bring in a privacy law. And with that happening, I think a lot of more data will be put out. But, you know, the important thing is that government officers love to keep data. The data, they're so passionate about keeping data as if it's a very valuable thing. Yes, it is valuable, but put out a lot of data so that youngsters can do innovative work. And I think we need to create a great data portal.
Are you the exception within the government who believes that this should be the way forward, that the government should be magnanimous and generous and share data?
Of course, you can't be a great innovative nation. India can never become a cutting-edge innovative nation without putting out data in public domain. I mean, who's going to do innovation? The innovation is always driven by youngsters, by young startups, by universities, by academicians, by researchers. Innovation is rarely driven by the government. And therefore, government needs, and why when John Chambers says, he's very right, that government has to be the key catalyst, government has to be the key facilitator, government must push the limits of innovation in the private sector.
Okay, since you talked about data and you talked about Indian startups benefiting by the use of data, you know, there's a lot of controversy around data localization. Some see that argument as India's approach to being protectionist. Others believe that it's the right thing to do and the right way forward. Where do you stand on that? Do you believe that for instance, for now, data localization norms only apply to payment companies. But do you believe that this is protectionist, or do you believe that we need to be mindful?
Yeah, so my belief, Shireen, on this is that there is a lot of critical data. What I would say is critical data to human beings. I mean, look at health data, for instance. I think there's a need for localization of data on critical aspects.
Okay. So payments, health.
Yeah, so very critical aspects. India must keep that data localized, and that's important to do that. But there's a lot of data which is not critical, where we should allow data mirrorization. It need not be localized, but a lot of mirrorization of that data can take place, according to me. I mean, that's my personal view. It's not the government's view, and we should, that's data which is not critical, where we should allow a lot of more mirrorization to take place.
Okay, so non-critical data allow mirrorization. One of the other things that has been spoken of, and you know, we saw a move towards perhaps a more protectionist approach, the e-commerce policy, which finally never came through. But there is the camp that believes that India should go the China route, protect domestic companies, protect Indian entrepreneurs, and keep the foreigners out. We haven't done that. Do you believe that it's too late in the day and in the game to try and turn the wheels around?
No, you know, I'm a great believer in the market. I believe that we must clearly understand what the market is all about. And it's also important to understand that Indian startups today are being driven, their financing, a lot of that is coming from international.
Yeah, majority of it.
Yeah, it's all coming from international sources.
And coming in large dollops from China as well.
So last year we got, say, for instance, close to about 4.3 billion. We've had 8 unicorns. This year we'll have another 10 unicorns. Late stage funding, a lot of that is coming from international markets. And therefore my belief is that either we build up our own system of financing, which doesn't exist at the moment. I mean, we should have many more Indian family systems, enterprises supporting Indian startups. In fact, one of my complaints is about Indian family enterprises. And I think there's a vast number of Indian family enterprises which must support our startup enterprises. Because if $4.3 billion that all came in late stage financing for our startups, and that came in last year. My view is that we should allow this inflow to continue so that many of our startups, you know, because India's flourished on the back of a liberalized economy. India's flourished on the back of a growing, expanding startup movement. And actually, when we started the startup movement, many of our Indian companies were going abroad and registering themselves. We are now seeing a reversal of that trend. We are seeing, many companies like Mitra Biotech, Netrodyne, and all that relocating to India.
Yeah.
And therefore, we should allow many of these companies, they are attracting investments from abroad.
This is not your personal view, this is the government's view.
What?
You made that distinction in the previous one that on data localization it was your personal view but not the government's view. So what is the government's view on this? On protecting Indian startups and possibly curbing the kind of control that foreign capital enjoys
today? Government's views is the existing rules and regulations as of now. There's no other view at the moment. At the moment, the government rule is an existing rules and regulations which exists, which allows investments to come in from abroad for all startups, which is happening at the moment. I mean, and the total inflows into startups actually has grown
yes.
From last year, from year before, from 2.8 billion, it has grown to 4.3 billion last year. It has grown, and that's the existing policy. Okay. In fact, India has a very, very liberal policy as far as both, one of the most liberalized policy as far as both foreign direct investment
yes.
and as far as startups are concerned.
Well, that's absolutely right. We do have a very open FDI policy. Let me then ask you, sir, because you talked about how the government can work with the startup ecosystem to nurture innovation as well as further the cause of startups. One of the constraints continues to be the lack of appreciation of how this model works, of how this ecosystem works. And this keeps coming back to the tax system. You know, fair market value, what kind of valuation, how are you projecting these kind of numbers, and this has been a complaint that startups are having to deal with, and some of the smaller ones, in fact, are hugely burdened by having to sort of work with or engage with the tax department just to get by on a day-to-day basis. So can there be some way, some intelligence that can be incorporated into the dealings to understand really what this new ecosystem is about?
Shireen, you can be critical about it, but let me tell you that the amount of hand-holding which the government in India has done for startups to create the third best ecosystem in the world, no other country has been able to do in such a quick, sharp time. And that's the main reason why we've had 1,200 startups last year, growing and expanding, and that's the reason why startup movement has grown to Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, and is now going to even Tier 4 cities. I'm quite amazed to find that startups are coming in from places like Hubli, remarkable startups coming from Hubli, they're coming from Jamshedpur. I was quite surprised to find a startup in Saharanpur, a couple of startups in Saharanpur. I was quite amazed at all this happening. So India has been able to create a very, very vibrant, dynamic, energetic startup, and I think some remarkable work has been done by the Startup India Hub and by the DIPP in all this, and I think the Atal Innovation Mission is supporting a lot of young tinkering labs, and we are supporting incubation centers. We can definitely say that we need many more incubation centers, but you know, the attempt has been to create a very liberalized ecosystem. Once in a while, as it happens, you will have a tax issue relating to angel investors, etc. But I think, to my mind, the DIPP and Secretary DIPP personally took a lot of interest and sorted out most of the issues.
Yes.
But if there are still issues, we are all here to sort out the challenges of the Startup India movement.
Well, and the DIPP Secretary is here, Ramesh Abhishek, the man who has helped address, there he is walking in, the man who has helped address many of the issues that we speak of. I'll end then by asking you,
this issue of angel investment, I'm aware that Abhishek personally took it upon himself to sort it out. But if there are challenges, we are all here. And that's the reason why the government of India has been able to create, because all of us are here to support the movement. All of us are here to assist, support. But only one thing I would like to say, that the startups of tomorrow will have to use cutting-edge technologies. I mean, if you see the trend today, cutting across health, cutting across education, cutting across even e-commerce, all the startups which are making it big and are actually driving the growth are all which are using artificial intelligence, and that will be the key. And the second thing is that those startups which are making it big are those which are not looking at the boundaries, geographical boundaries of the domestic market, but are really looking at exports and are looking at global markets. And it's very important that our young startups and young Turks in particular, because, in India, one of the challenges is that how do we make our small grow big, medium, and medium make it grow big. And that can only happen if the mindset must be one of penetrating global markets.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you. I'll end by asking you, and this is again, often the banter that you hear in drawing rooms, how can you bring a more startup-ish attitude into the Indian bureaucracy?
Well, I think one is, the government must continue to disrupt, and continue to disrupt in many, many ways across sectors. That's number one. Number two, I think the government, every single department of government must do projects around artificial intelligence, because that will be the next big disruption which will happen, and government must lead the way. It's not the private sector. The biggest disruptions must happen in government. And that will happen if government uses the most advanced technologies themselves. And number three, what the rise and ease of doing business, and I would personally like to compliment Abhishek on that, for the great leadership is demonstrated. What it demonstrates is that if Indians put their mind and heart and soul into a thing, it's possible to transform India very rapidly and very fast.
Well, on that note, Mr. Kant, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here at the Young Turks Conclave. We wish you the very best of luck. We hope you continue to play disruptor within the government, and the best of luck with the outcomes that you've been able to achieve at the Niti Aayog. Once again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Shri.
Shaveen, I would request you to hand out a token of appreciation.